So, what do you suppose it is? I don't know, it looks kind of like an elf, but the ears are weirdly round and it has body hair. Yeah, can't be an elf. Maybe it's a tall dwarf? No, not enough body hair to be dwarven. Plus, I've never heard of a dwarf over 4 feet tall. Yeah, me neither. Don't they all have beards? Pretty sure. These voices sounded strange to me, like they're speaking my language but in a weird accent or something. And the voices were heavy? No, that's not the term. Rumbling? Why is it so hard to think? A gnome. No, gnomes are just short elves. It could be some sort of weird pig kobold thing. Oh yeah, wait. That still doesn't explain the round ears. Plus the face is all wrong. Look, the nose is too pointy. Am I asleep? Dreaming? What are they talking about? The last thing I remember was going to the hospital to see my girlfriend. Did I get hurt along the way? Are these people doctors? I'm not in any pain, though. But I can't open my eyes. Why can't I open my eyes? What happened to me? I wonder if it can talk. Where'd you find this thing anyway? You remember that wall collapse in the dungeon? My team and I were exploring that and we got separated. Next thing I know, I find this thing on some sort of weird-looking table. It had a bunch of writing on it, but, well, you know. Yeah, you have trouble reading. That's all right, go on. Right. Well, I figured that I'd have a hell of a time trying to find my way back there, so I decided to take it with me. Once I picked it up, a lot of light started shining, and suddenly, I was at the dungeon entrance. Teleportation? Yeah, probably. Huh, that's interesting. You know, since you found it in our dungeon, it might be an orc. Boisterous laughter. It reminds me of my old karate instructor. He used to laugh like that all the time, even when nobody was joking. I wonder what happened to him. I wonder what happened to me. I think I visited my girlfriend. The love of my life, Cassandra. She wasn't in pain today, but the cancer's getting worse. Her formerly luscious blonde hair that went all the way down to her waist was now patchy and wiry from the chemo. Her stunning blue eyes still had their kindness and humor, but betrayed the pain that she was desperately trying to hide. She looked kind of like a skeleton with skin now, but she joked that maybe she can finally be a model. She's still my Cass. I stayed with her until she fell asleep. Then I started to head home. I had to study because even with everything going on, they were still making me take finals. The bastards know that Cass is sick, but they don't care. State requirements for graduation or whatever pisses me off. Fuck them. I want to drop out and get a job. But Cass won't hear of it. Neither will Mom. Dad understands and says he'd do the same, but he'd like me to respect the wishes of Mom and Cass. How am I supposed to study with the thought of losing her looming over my head, though? How can I think of anything else? There's no way this thing's an orc. It's too small. Plus the ears. Yeah, I feel like you're hyperfixated on the ears. Hyper what now? Fixated. You're focusing too much on the ears. Well, they're weird, though. Have you ever heard of anything that has round ears? Not off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's something. After all, we're looking at round ears right now. Round ears. What does that have to do with anything? Whatever. Nothing to do with me. What happened after I started to walk home? I stopped by a gas station and grabbed some chips and a soda to lighten my spirits. And the last thing I remember is crossing the street. There were horns and screeching and then huge lights. Pain. I felt pain all over my body. And then nothing. Did I get hit by a truck? I wish we could ask it what it is. Well, I could cast healing magic on it. See if that wakes it up. You think Chief would be okay with that? He'll probably want to see it first, right? I won't tell if you don't. We'll just say that it woke up on its own. All right, deal. Awesome. Keep a hand on your axe, just in case. Ready. Lai ronim tsak. A pleasant warmth began to spread throughout my body, like getting a massage from a million fingers all at once. My grogginess began to ebb, and I opened my eyes. Things were blurry at first, but I was soon able to focus on the wooden ceiling. I don't know this ceiling. Wait, wooden ceiling? What kind of building has a wooden ceiling? A barn? I sat up and looked around. The furniture in the room looked like it came straight out of a medieval movie, but a bad one that didn't pay attention to details. I was on a bed with woven sheets and a blanket, for one thing. For another, there were metal handles on some of the furniture. That wasn't a thing in medieval times, right? Then the two people who were talking earlier caught my eye. Cosplayers? How'd they manage to look so big? One was wearing metallic armored pants and no top, showing off its rippling muscles. It looked as if it were scared of me, and it was holding a large serrated axe at its side. The other one was wearing a robe and carrying a staff with some sort of metal ball at the top. All of these details about their appearances were striking, but the most striking thing was that they were both green, pointy ears, and huge. Even hunched over, the robed one with the staff was probably 6'5". The one with the axe was pushing 6'10". The one with the staff grinned and showed a mouth full of very pointy teeth, like an alligator's. "Whoa, careful there, you just woke up. Don't want you falling over," it said. The words sounded weird, as if I weren't hearing them right. No, that's not it. The mouth movements are weird. It's like they're saying something else, but it's dubbed over, with a hint of the original audio left in. Where am I? Who are you? What are you?" I asked, trying not to panic. My mouth felt weird when I spoke, like I'm saying the words that I'm saying, but my mouth was moving differently, like trying to make a ta sound but making a k sound instead. There was something else that was strange as well, but I couldn't figure it out. "I'm Yulk," the grinning one said. "This is my brother Nash. We're orcs." "Yep, nice to meet you. You're in Nulava, a temporary orc settlement that's right outside of the Delver's dungeon. We're hoping to make it a village someday," Nash said, taking his hand off his axe and crossing his arms. "Orc?" I asked, getting used to the weird talking. "Yes," Yulk said. "We're orcs. Now that we've answered your questions, I'd like to ask you one." "Ask me a question?" I asked. What are you?" Nash interrupted impatiently. I sat stunned for a moment. Orcs are real, and what do they mean, what am I? I looked at my hands, the same ones I've always had, even with the same scar I got as a kid, though the scar was looking a bit smaller now. I noticed I didn't have my shirt on, and I quickly checked under the blanket. Yep, naked. Weird. All of this is weird. What the hell is going on? Nash cleared his throat, patiently waiting for me to answer his question. "I'm a human, and my name's Nick, short for Nicodemus. Nicodemus Liam Smith," I stammered as I pulled the blanket up a little bit more. The two orcs shared a confused glance at each other before looking back to me. What's there to be confused about? Sure, Nicodemus is kind of a rare name, but it's not that rare. Hell, I used to get picked on for it all the time. The secret of NIMH is single-handedly the reason that I go by Nick. Yulk turned back to me and asked, "What's a human, huh?" "What?" I asked. "I've never heard of a human before," Nash said, scratching his head. "What were you doing locked away in the dungeon?" "What dungeon? What do you mean you've never heard of a human?" I asked. "Okay, wait," Yulk said. "Let's try not to make assumptions here. Let's start at the beginning and get on the same page. Nick, you're a human. We don't know what that is. Nash here found you in a secret room inside the Delver's dungeon. You don't know how you got there?" "No, the last thing I remember was walking home and—" I trailed off. "Oh, right. What?" "I think I got hit by a truck." "What's a truck?" Nash asked. "It's like a wagon or something that doesn't need anything to pull it," I said. "Oh, we've got those," Nash said. "Right, Yulk." "Yes, we call them magic carts, but I suspect that they're not the same thing." "Magi? Carts? Carts pulled with magic?" I asked. "Yep," both orcs replied in unison. Wait. Orcs, magic, dungeons, getting hit by a truck. Did I get isekai'd? Or is this just a hallucination that my dying brain is showing me to protect me from the trauma of getting hit by a truck? I suppose there's nothing I can do about this being a hallucination, so I have to go off the assumption that it's not. Which means finding a way back. Wait, if I got reincarnated or whatever to this place, then maybe Cass did as well. "Have you seen any other things like me?" I asked. "Like others in the dungeon? Any females? They usually have long hair and larger breasts." "Oh, so you're a male human?" Yulk asked. I kinda guessed, but didn't want to be presumptuous. "No, like I said earlier, we haven't seen anything like you before," Nash said. Then he leaned closer to Yulk and asked quietly, "What's presumptuous mean?" "It means not being able to observe what's appropriate or permitted in a social setting," Yulk whispered back. Meanwhile, I was trying not to lose it. Cass is terminally ill with cancer, and I wasn't going to be there for her when she passed. I clenched my jaw and stared at the ceiling as I fought back tears. It's not fair. She doesn't deserve to be alone, and I promised. I promised her that I'd be by her side until the end. "I take it that all this comes as a bit of a shock," Yulk said softly. Yeah, it does," I replied. "All right, well, we'll let you process things. We've got to go tell the chief you're up." "And then get yelled at for waking you up," Nash said. "We'll send someone in with food and drink in a bit." "Wait," I said. "Where do I go to?" "Defecate." Nash looked surprised, and then pointed to the door opposite the one he and his brother were next to. "That's the bathroom. Pull the handle to flush the toilet." "Okay," I said, wiping my eyes. The two orcs left the room. Indoor plumbing was unexpected, but I suppose I shouldn't be entirely surprised. There's magic here, and there's no telling what that magic can do. Maybe it can return me to my world in time to be with Cass again, so that I can say goodbye. Or maybe even save her. I owe it to her to try, at least. She's made me happier than any man has a right to be. The room started spinning a little bit, so I laid back down. How did I go from getting hit by a truck to being asleep in a dungeon anyway? And when you get isekai, don't you normally get to talk to a sexy goddess or a pervy old god? Some exposition would have been nice. It finally hit me what else felt weird about this place. The air. It smelt different, tasted weird, and was hotter than it should be. But all of these things weren't necessarily strange. You would get that just by going to a different city. No, what was strange was how it felt on my skin. A tingle that felt like it should be giving me goosebumps but wasn't. Very odd. The door to the room opened and a short orc, still about 5'9" inches or so, entered holding a plate full of meat with a cup of something on it. Her green skin was slightly paler than the other two orcs, and she had an air of grace surrounding her that defied expectations. Like meeting a princess in a bandit camp. What she was wearing definitely wasn't something that royalty would wear, though. It was an outfit that left little to the imagination. A skin-tight bikini top and very short shorts that exaggerated her ample curves. I tried not to stare, but noticed she was trembling and trying not to look at me as she set the platter down on a table next to my bed. Then she quickly turned and almost ran out of the room. "Weird," I said under my breath. I looked at the plate of meat. I guess this confirms that the orcs are carnivorous. I figured that was the case based on the teeth, though. Going to be hard to deal with a meat-only diet since I'm not a fan of liver. At least they cook it. Would these guys farm? Maybe for trade or to feed their domesticated animals. I'll have to ask. I took a bite from one of the brown pieces of meat. The tart metallic taste made me grimace a bit. Liver. A necessity for omnivores on a meat-only diet, though. As I chewed the gamey meat, I found myself hoping desperately that they had wild orange trees or something nearby. The white meat was far more palatable, though. It tastes similar to chicken, but not quite. Like a juicier version of quail. I washed it down with the liquid in the cup, plain old water, but it felt more refreshing than anything I've ever had. I wondered how long I had been unconscious in that dungeon they mentioned. Hopefully not long. I don't even know if time works the same here as it did on my world. There's too much I don't know. I finished the food and suddenly realized how weak and tired I felt, like I had been running around carrying heavy stuff all day. I was afraid to go back to sleep at first, but then I thought that if I go to sleep, maybe I'll wake up in a proper hospital bed back in my world. Maybe this is just a dream. Maybe I'll be able to see Cass again. I'll do anything to see her again. "So you two woke it up?" Chief Gluhern shouted. "No, sir," I lied. "We were simply guessing at what he could be when he woke up all on his own," Yulk lied. "We had a short discussion with him, had Catalina grab him some food, and came immediately here to inform you, sir." The chief eyed us suspiciously. He knows we're lying, but he also knows that he can't prove it. Yulk and I will cover each other until our dying breath, and it's not like the human can tell on us. If the chief can't prove it, He can't openly punish us without people getting mad about injustice. Then he'll have to listen to speech after speech after speech. A much worse punishment than whatever he'd give us. Which means that he'll probably resort to underhanded punishments. I fully expect to be voluntold to do some extra chores this week. A shame. Yulk and I really wanted to go back into the dungeon and look for clues about the human. Maybe we should have left it alone after all. Smells like bullshit to me, but I'm assuming there's no witnesses, Gluhern said as he looked around. After a few shaken heads, he turned back to us. There never are with you two, so it calls itself a human then? He, sir, and yes, he says he's a human, not that it helps, Yulk said, dodging a thrown cup. Don't correct me, sorcerer, Gluhern shouted. Sir, did the others find anything related to the human? I asked, attempting to distract him from his rage. The chief drew a deep breath and said, Actually, no. Your team still hasn't returned. We're sending a rescue party at sunrise. My blood ran cold. Bloon, Graz, Inoris, and Rezgal were pretty tough guys. Almost as tough as me. Party wipes weren't exactly uncommon, but they don't happen to adventurers over level 5 very often. Those 4 are level 7, so they should be able to handle just about anything. What the hell's going on? I'd like to join the rescuers, I said. Me too, sir, Yulk added. I'm afraid not, Gluhern said, no longer angry. You're both under-leveled for the rescue party. Since they're over level 5, we're sending the over 10s. You'll be liabilities. I gnashed my teeth in frustration, but Chief isn't wrong. Reaching level 10 is an enormous accomplishment, and the difference in power between a level 9 and 10 is extreme. The downside to reaching that rank was all of the extra responsibility that came with it. Most over 10s go into mercenary work, leaving their homes behind. If they don't, they'll quickly get swamped with work that the other adventurers can't handle. Aren't they busy? Yulk asked. Alern and Kirisaka accomplished their task in the wastes and they're back. Rirnu and Pakin haven't been doing much as there aren't many wounded. 2 medics, a tank, and a rogue. The perfect rescue party, Gluhern replied with a grin. Pakin isn't a medic, she's a necromancer, I replied with distaste. That's just a late medic if you think about it, Yulk said cheerily. Plus she knows combat magic as well. Yeah, well, she'd better be on time, I grumbled. Bloon owes me a drink, and zombies don't pay their debts. Do skeletons? Yulk asked. How the hell should I know? Well, how do you know that zombies don't then? Enough, shouted the chief. The matter of the rescue party is settled. The only matter I have left to discuss with you is your next task. Yulk and I stared at the grinning chief with stalwart expressions. We knew he wouldn't dare officially punish us, but there was a certain level of unease regarding the underhanded task he would give us. He won't be sending us into the dungeon. He knows we'll join the rescue party. There's a possibility that he'll send us into the wastes on retrieval duty, though. The damned herbs that go into meta potions love that sandy shithole. You'll guard the human until I say otherwise. One set of eyes on it at all times, Gluhern said, chuckling as my face fell. I'll leave it up to you to decide the shifts. If you wander off, I'll have your hides. Dibs on first shift, Yulk shouted unexpectedly. I turned to my brother and was shocked to see him nearly bouncing with excitement. Guard duty is the most boring task available, and just about any orc worth their salt will do anything to avoid it. I looked back to the chief, who shared my expression of shock. Why are you so excited? I asked. No reason, Yulk said, suddenly nervous. Let's go. He grabbed me and began dragging me out of the room just as the chief was having second thoughts about our new assignment. I struggled a bit, but Yulk has a remarkably tight grip for a sorcerer. I watched the chief shrug as we left the room. What the hell's got into you? I asked as I finally shook his grip. Nash, we get to study the human, Yulk said, actually bouncing up and down this time. We might be the only ones who've ever met one. Okay, I said with a sigh. I see your point. It is kinda cool. I can't wait! I wonder if he has any magic resistances. That pink skin it has doesn't look like it's any tougher than ours. Be careful, brother, I cautioned. I wasn't able to tell if he heard my warning or not because he immediately started mumbling to himself and walking towards the hospital. I sighed as I followed after him. He'd always been like this. Something strikes his fancy and he becomes unable to think of anything else until he's figured it out. Even if the chief hadn't tasked us with guard duty, Yulk probably would have ended up hanging around the humans' room. "Hey Nash, wait up!" a familiar voice called out to me. I turned and saw a larger-than-life figure wearing full blackened plate armor and carrying a sword that was nearly as long as I am tall. I grabbed Yulk's arm to stop him from wandering off and nodded at the figure as it approached. "Hello, Alern. I hope the day finds you well. What can I do for you?" I asked him. "I wanted to ask you about the rescue mission," Alern replied. "Would you mind answering a few questions for us?" "Us?" "I have apprised him of the likelihood that you know nothing other than what we've already been told," a voice said from behind me. I suppressed my urge to swing around. No need to. I already knew who it was. There isn't anyone else in the village that could sneak up on me, and he did so as often as he could. "Hello, Kirisaka," I said as I calmly turned to face him. Kirisaka is shorter than most orcs, but nobody has pointed that out to him since he was a child. There was a coldness in his eyes that would unnerve a drake. He's only a rogue in the sense that he knows how to avoid traps and pass through locks. His specialty in combat is quick, silent movement and striking vital areas with enough force to obliterate plate armor. The reason that everyone confuses his class is that he's the only shadow warrior in the village, and he doesn't bother correcting people who get it wrong. I glanced at his short swords. I prefer an axe, but I wouldn't complain if I had to use those babies. They were simple but elegant, double-edged, with an exaggerated point and pommels designed after the sun and the moon. Kirisaka had received them as a reward for saving a wealthy elven family in the wastes. "How much?" I asked. "They are still not for sale. They shall never be for sale. Stop asking," Kirisaka replied tersely. "I'll give you 20 gold, 10 each," I said. "You do not have 20 gold," he countered. "I'll borrow it and pay it off by killing things in the dungeons with those swords." "No, you shall not, because I will not be selling them." "Pardon me," Alern interrupted. "Time is of the essence. Nash, your party went to explore the part of the dungeon that was revealed by the collapsed wall. You were gone for a day before you exited. Did you encounter any enemies?" "No," I sighed. "We didn't even see any traces of monster activity. It was eerily quiet." "How then did you become separated?" Kirisaka asked, annoyed that he'd been wrong, or that I kept looking at his swords. "The strap on my pack came loose, and I stopped to fix it. They didn't want to stop, so they kept going," I explained. "I fixed my pack and ran after them, but there was a fork in the path. There weren't any footprints or markers, and I decided to go left, but I guess they went right. I ended up in a sort of labyrinth, and that's when I found the human." "Human?" Alern asked. "Oh, the thing you found in the dungeon. How do you know what it's called?" "It woke up," Yulk said excitedly. I see," Alern stuttered, caught off guard by Yulk's demeanor. "Well, Nash, did you see or hear anything odd on your way out? Any clue to what might have kept them from returning?" "When I picked up the human, I was teleported to the entrance of the dungeon with it still in my arms. I didn't even know the rest of the team was still in there until Chief told me just a few minutes ago," I said. "It's been a couple days. They definitely should have been back by now." "I understand. We'll find them, Nash. Don't worry too much," Alern said. "Let us begin our rescue," Kirisaka said. Alern nodded, and they went on their way. Yulk and I continued on our way to guard the human. When we entered the hospital building, there were 3 girls peeking through the door into the human's room. Maybe the chief had a point assigning us as guards. "What are you doing?" I asked. The girls jumped back, falling over each other in the process. The first girl who managed to stand back up was Catalina, the one we'd asked to bring food to the human. "We're just curious," she said. "Yeah," Yini said from the ground. "We wanted to see the new pet." "Pets don't talk," Yulk said. "Pets are for petting. That's why they're called pets." Yini scowled for a moment before she realized it was Yulk that was talking to her. Then her face softened. It's obvious to everyone except Yulk that Yini fancies him. My brother is smart, but he's dumb in his own way. "You're right, It's so cute," Nomura interrupted. "Are you sure you found it in the dungeon?" Yes, I'm sure, I said sternly. And because of that, it may be dangerous. Keep your distance. We can handle ourselves, Catalina said, pretending like she hadn't been cowering when we asked her to feed it. It's pretty small. It's short, but it's also muscular. I get the feeling that it's stronger than it looks. But even if you could fight it, Chief would get mad at you for putting yourselves in the situation to fight it. Especially if you killed it before we found out more about it, I replied. Yeah. Is it some kind of elf? Yini asked. Maybe, but it calls itself a human, Yolk replied excitedly. It may be an offshoot species of elf, or maybe an ancestor of the elves. We don't know how long it was in that dungeon for. Did it eat? I asked. Yes, I'm pretty sure. The platter looks empty, Catalina said. So you didn't retrieve the platter? I asked smugly. No, it's sleeping. I didn't want to wake it up, she replied defensively. Damn it all, sleeping again, Yolk said with disappointment. Oh well, at least that confirms it's carnivorous like us, and not herbivorous like the elves. So maybe it's not related to the elves? Yini asked. Maybe not. Maybe it's related to orcs. We did find it in the orc dungeon after all. We? I found it. Stop trying to take credit for my find, I said teasingly. Yes, you found it. Anyways, if it's an ancestor of the orcs, then it's probably much stronger than it looks. So Nash is right. You three should be careful, Yolk said. The three girls looked crestfallen. Hearing it from me was one thing. I'm a bit dumb, so they don't think I know what I'm talking about. They always listen to Yolk, though. He's probably the smartest orc in the village, even though he's dumb when it comes to women. Poor Yini. She's got an uphill battle in the fight for his affection. Okay, Yini finally said. We'll go. Sorry. No need for apologies if you don't do it again, Yolk said cheerily. Plus it'll be safer with Nash and I guarding him. It's a him? Nemora asked. Don't even think about it, I told her. I'm not, she said. Then how'd you know what I'm talking about? I asked. Shut up. Nemora always had an eye for odd ones. She frequently flirts with the non-orc traders that pass through. They politely flirt back, but not a single one of them will ever take her up on the offer. It's not very common for other species to interbreed, at least in my experience, but orcs cannot breed with other species. Trying to can be fatal. Well, we should get back to our duties, Catalina said. Agreed, I replied tersely. The girls left, and we entered the room quietly. I checked the platter. The human had ate and drank everything on offer. I took a moment to study his features. He had a few scars on his face, which was kind of cool. His black hair was cut short in a way I'd never seen before. If I had to guess his height, I'd say somewhere around 5'10", about as short as the girls, but something about him told me that he's like Kirasaka. I can't quite put my finger on why, but I feel like he's dangerous.